Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pardot Consultant 7 Days Bootcamp by Pardot New Delhi and Pardot Ajmer. Hey, Lucy, we give you a warm welcome here. We are so excited to hear and look forward. What are you really going to bring for us? So, not briefing much about me, but yes, we really want to know more about you and what you have for us to listen forward. All over to you, Lucy.
Sure. Thank you. And what a privilege to be kicking off the boot camp this week. So I'm going to be talking about the first section in the exam guide, which is called evaluation. So you may not get a lot from that one single word, but my objective is to dig deeper into that and what it means. I know you'll have the privilege of listening to a study cast this week of Marketing Champions, but first of all, you have to listen to me go on about evaluation for a bit. But I'll try to make it as lighthearted as possible. And I've been really looking forward to this session today. So thank you, Isha and team for organising it all. I'm based in London and we've just gone into a national lockdown. So this has been the highlight of my week and I've been looking forward to it. So let me sorry, I just realised I wasn't sharing my screen. One moment. That's better. Can everyone see the screen? Great. So yes, I'm Lucy. I'm a 6-time certified and I spent a few years working as a marketing automation consultant. During that time, I worked on a lot of Pardot projects in different capacities. There were short-term projects, long-term projects. Some were implementation stage. I've done audits. I've been a consultant for general administration of Pardot, and lots of projects where businesses wanted to get more out of their investment. So it's a bit of a joke, and I suppose it's a cliche to say I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to Pardot. Nowadays, however, I'm the editor of SalesforceBend.com. So hopefully some of you would have heard of our site. We cover pretty much all Salesforce topics, including a lot on certifications. So you'll find relevant material on there. I'll also be calling out resources from another one of our blogs called The Drip. So I founded The Drip back in 2016, and this focuses on Pardot and Salesforce marketing automation more specifically. So like I said, I'll be referring to a few resources that go into more detail on what I'm talking about today. But I recommend you just check out the blog anyway, because I write from a consultant's point of view. So it was content that I would write at the end of days after consulting. So it gets you hearing about thinking things through, thinking use cases through from a consultant's point of view. I am a Salesforce marketing champion. I was honoured to be named a champion at the start of 2020, and I'm the co-leader of the London user group for Pardot, or B2B marketing. So my journey to becoming a certified Pardot consultant was actually quite slow. I did take my time doing it. I got my specialist certification in 2016. Then I worked as a Pardot consultant for a few years. I said to myself, because I lived abroad and then I came back to the UK, I said to myself, okay, I've got to sit down. I've got to sit still for a few hours and pass the certification. So it was actually the last of the most recent one, the last of the 6. And I think I got that at the start of 2018. So there was a big gap between me passing the specialist and the consultant. So yes, evaluation. This is what I'm here to talk about today. It's the first section on the exam guide. So it's a natural place to start when you first look at it, at the Trailhead exam guide. And it has the second highest weighting of all the sections. So it equals 17% of the total questions on the exam guide. And when you do the maths, that's going to be around 10 or 11 questions out of the 60 that you'll get served up on the exam. If you've studied for other Salesforce or Pardot certifications, then you may be familiar with the given a scenario sentences on the study guides and not really knowing where to start with them. As we'll come to see in a minute, the section, the wording in this section doesn't point to specific Pardot features or areas that you should look at in Pardot. So you may feel like you're shooting in the dark sometimes when you're starting out with studying, which is okay, because there's a lot to cover. In some ways, I do think I got assigned quite a tricky topic to teach. It's the hardest section to learn purely by studying. You really do need practical experience, or practical experience really does help master this section, because there's nothing really to learn by heart. It's not like describing what a completion action does in Pardot, or how to enable the Pardot Lightning app. It's a lot broader. But the point of the Pardot Consultant certification is to prepare you for a Pardot Consultant role, if that's the next step you want to take in your career, of course. So it's designed to really test your consulting know-how. So when I say Pardot Consultant, the first image that may come to your mind is someone that works as a consultant or who specializes in Pardot at a Salesforce consultancy. But actually, it can be more than that. Other things count. And consultant can mean different things. You could be working as an advisor in your organization. That counts as being a consultant because you're working with internal teams. The colleagues in your team or other teams internally are your clients almost, that you need to build solutions for, and they hold you accountable to delivering it. So even if you are not a Pardot consultant, you may already have a lot of experience and skills just by being an advisor in your organization. So don't discount your practical knowledge and experience there. So the exam guide says that the ideal candidate is someone that has generally has 12 months of hands-on experience implementing and administering the Pardot Lightning app and Salesforce platform. But they should also possess facilitation and consultative skills to gather the business requirements, design solution alternatives, and implement them to business needs. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about in the evaluation stage really reflects that, reflects what Salesforce wants out of a certified Pardot consultant. So yes, here's some questions to ask yourself to see if you are a consultant. Do you relate to any of these in your day-to-day role? Are you problem solving? Are you regarded as the knowledgeable person at the table? Do you pause to think, okay, if this, then what happens? If we design this in Pardot, what are the implications further down the line? You know, does something that you've designed trigger something that will have an impact on another part of the system? Do you listen to the whole story before you jump to a solution? So do you listen to all the details about what people are sharing before going ahead and putting specific features to solve it? Because you may pick up on small things that that could change the way you design a solution. And also, do you just not simply take what people tell you and implement it? Do you always try to dig under the surface? Don't take things at face value is another way to put it. So if you said yes to any of these, then you're already in a consultant mindset. So let's get back to the exam guide. In the evaluation section, there are 2 study requirements that you need to cover. So I'm going to dive into each of them to explore more about what you need to learn. So this is the first one. Given a scenario that includes an assessment of a customer's current Salesforce and Pardot landscape, as well as business objectives, analyze and make recommendations on a path forward. Now, there's a lot of words there and it's quite overwhelming, but I want to help you pick apart what that means and what happens in the exam when you are given a scenario. So you'll actually see that that big long sentence is broken down into 3 main parts. The first one is assess their current Salesforce and Pardot landscape. The second, identify their business objectives. And then the third, you need to combine that information to make recommendations. So we could put this in a formula like this. So imagine that you're working with a new org. You need to find out many things about that org to make the best decisions before you even think about putting a solution together. Every Pardot account and its Salesforce org, the org it's connected to, will be different. There are so many ways that these can vary because, of course, every org is configured to a specific business's needs. So this could be different features they've enabled, the add-on products they've purchased, and so on. The main things to look at when you approach a new Salesforce or Pardot org are inbound data, leads, accounts and contacts, campaigns, custom objects, users, reports, and connectors and integrations. And I am going to run through each of those right now. So I've started with asking about their Pardot edition. Even though questions about licenses and Pardot editions, for example, the Plus edition, the Advanced edition, they won't come up in the exam. This is just the best starting point for any project, because from that information, you'll know which features you have available to use. And you don't want to design a solution and then run up against limitations when you find out that they're actually on a lower edition and you don't have access to some of the other features. But also, ask, have they purchased Pardot business units? Well, if they're on an advanced edition, they'll have access to business units. Have they purchased B2B marketing analytics? What about Salesforce Engage? So, and if it's an existing account, have they updated to the Pardot Lightning app? And is everyone using it? Does everyone feel comfortable with it? Inbound data sources. So what sources of data do they have coming into Pardot, and marketing data coming into Salesforce as well? Don't forget about that. So they may be using web to lead forms. They could be bringing data in from list imports. Other marketing automation tools that are integrated to Salesforce may have been pushing data in previously. So it's just really important to get an idea of what data you're dealing with and where it's coming from. Do they have any governance around the data? So an approval process to ensure that whatever data you are sending to other systems or that you're bringing into Pardot is going to be good quality and adhere to the standards of data around the organization. So questions to ask about leads. Are they even using the lead object? Some organizations will only use contacts, and you want to make sure that the Pardot connector is creating the right records. So if they're not using leads, you need to make sure that the Pardot connector isn't creating leads from Pardot. Do they follow a lead life cycle? So do their leads go through certain stages such as open and qualified? Do they use the lead conversion process properly? Are they using lead assignment rules, lead queues? You really need to know this stuff to make sure that leads, when prospects, when they're assigned from Pardot, they're going to the right place. Then accounts and contacts, do they have different types of accounts? How are they different from each other? Are they using person accounts? Again, things that you need to consider for the connector. Moving on to campaigns, are they using Salesforce campaigns properly? We all know that the way that Pardot's moving and the importance of multi-touch attribution, Salesforce campaigns are completely necessary, and they, using a hierarchy as well is best practice. Still, so many organizations don't use campaigns in best practice. Have they also enabled connected campaigns? Then with custom objects, are the marketing team using any custom objects that are important to their processes that you need to factor into solutions? When it comes to users, you need to ask which users should be using Pardot. It's not just the marketing team sometimes. Other teams may need access to Pardot. Do all these users have a Salesforce license? Because now, in order to gain access to Pardot, you need to have a Salesforce license. And then things like, have they enabled the user sync? That's also an important question to ask. Finally, connectors and integrations. Which tools do they need to connect to Pardot? Which are really essential in the first phase, like their webinar platforms, or do they need to use the social media connectors? So these items and categories that I just ran through, these are almost these are like the questions that I would have ready to ask whenever I went in to evaluate an existing Salesforce org, Pardot org, or a new implementation. So having an awareness of all of these and how they could impact your solution later on is key. Right. So when an organization invests in marketing automation, there are reasons that a lot of them share in common. Very popular reasons to invest in marketing automation, whereas other companies will have more specific objectives, but this will just depend from business to business. So some popular ones, you would have heard of them before. A business may invest in marketing automation to generate more leads, to reduce the length of their sales cycle. So for example, speed up the time that a lead goes, from being created as a lead to converting into an opportunity, to go through from the qualification stage to the closed won stage. They may want to speed up the time it takes for all of that to happen. They may want to reprioritize where marketing budget is spent to achieve higher ROI. So they may see, oh, actually, we can get much higher ROI from looking at campaign influence. Once Pardot's set up, they may say, okay, we don't want to spend in this area. We don't want to spend on Google Ads anymore. We want to invest more in our email marketing because that's bringing more ROI. They may want to increase the number of marketing qualified leads they're getting every quarter or every year. Increase the number of sales meetings that the sales team are able to book. And to do that, you need to obviously get the correct data, identify the really interested prospects. So there's a lot in that objective that marketing automation contributes to. And they may just want to improve their lead nurturing if they've got lots of past data, dormant data, lost opportunities, leads that went quiet. They may want to improve their lead nurturing to reactivate that missed opportunity, basically. So if you want ideas on business objectives to test yourself when you're studying for the exam, I really recommend you take a look at Pardot's own customer case studies. You can find lots of these on their website, or they also mention them on webinars and other places. And these ones mostly were taken from case studies from webinars that I found. So far, we've got the business objective and we know which features you have available to use. So everything that makes their org unique also, you've taken that into consideration. Now it's time to piece them together to make a recommendation. So here's a simple, quite generic example of that could actually come up on the exam, because a business objective to increase MQLs is a popular one that comes up a lot. So knowing what you know about their Salesforce and Pardot landscape, you could say, okay, does the prospect scores in the database, does the baseline scoring model really, is that being accurate? Is that scoring people properly? Or are prospect scores increasing too quickly? In that case, they may be going and being assigned too early. You can also say, okay, has prospect grading been set up? Because obviously that's important in identifying MQLs as well as scoring. But grading relies on progressive profiling. So you could recommend progressive profiling as a way to capture more data in order to make grading more accurate, which will improve the how you identify marketing qualified leads beyond just looking at the score. So yes, you may even find that some of the options in the questions in the exam will look like the recommendation paragraph that I've put there, and there will be slight differences between the options that you get. The exam may try to trick you out as well, but just in terms of giving you very similar options for the answers, but also ones that could both work. You just need to know which one is the best option to solve for the business objective, and taking into account the landscape in the question that they're outlining in the scenario of the exam question. So I recommend you read up about marketing automation use cases more widely, and understand also why people purchase Pardot in the first place. You can write out your own objectives and repeat the same process that I just did in that table. So yeah, and then you can list out which combination of Pardot functionality would work the best. And I'm sure that everyone presenting for the rest of the week will go into more details on each of the product areas that make up the solution. I've published a couple of posts on the drip that cover what I talk about today, so you can use those as references. I've included the first one here, which relates back to the section that I just spoke about. Sorry, jumped ahead there. So on to the second study requirement, which asks you to design a strategy to identify customer business needs based on marketing trends using currently available tools and methods. Again, another wordy sentence that you may read it and just get really overwhelmed. But again, we can break it down into 3 manageable chunks. The first, you need to identify the business needs. Second, you need to use available tools and methods to find data trends. And third of all, you can combine that information to design a strategy. So the first part, identify the business needs, is very similar to what I've just been through in the past section. So I'm just going to jump straight to looking at the marketing data trends. So what your job is to paint a picture of an organization and the context, their context, using their data. So only by understanding where an organization currently is, are you able to put together a strategy that will significantly improve their marketing outcomes. So you need to know where you're coming from to get where you want to be. Again, every Pardot account and connected Salesforce org is going to tell a different story. So you need to get digging. We need to know which data sources you have at your disposal and what kind of things you should be looking out for when you are doing this investigation. When it comes to data sources, luckily, Pardot and Salesforce customers have many analytics capabilities to use. But you shouldn't also forget the other sources of data that don't necessarily involve looking at screens. I've included these human and very rich data sources in the list as well. So we've got Salesforce reports and dashboards. So those that belong to the the marketing team, but also the sales team, because you want to be looking at what happens to a lead all the way through when they purchase to when they purchase and beyond. You want to be looking at the whole cycle, not just until the point that they become a marketing qualified lead. Now we've got B2B marketing analytics dashboards, which are very powerful and can be sliced and diced in many different ways. We have field data as well. So fields like score, grade, and also Einstein behavior score if they have Pardot Einstein. It's again another piece of information that you have available to show trends in the data. Then you have places like the website analytics. What's prospect behavior like on the website? And then obviously interviewing and observing users. So, the sales users, the marketing users, what kind of leads come through, what do they think of the quality, where is the sales team struggling to convert leads, things like this, and observing as well. Not necessarily speaking to them, just watching how they use the system. Then if you're doing a migration project, reports from their previous marketing automation tool are an obvious place to look, because that's going to tell you a wealth of information and things that you can obviously improve on when you implement Pardot. So I've already hinted at a few examples of things that you're supposed to be looking out for. You could be looking for velocity, so the speed in which prospects progress through the lead and opportunity life cycles. From that, you could be looking at the bottlenecks. So where are prospects spending too long? It could be a certain lead status or an opportunity stage. Where are they not converting? High and low volumes of certain measurements. For example, which forms have low submissions? Which are fewer leads captured in a certain month of the year? Which are the best performing campaigns that you may want to replicate again? Then you can also look at the successes and failures. So the successes are which leads were qualified, what do they look like, what characteristics do they have in common, which opportunities are closed won, again, what kind of companies. It will help you determine your ideal customer profile, your ideal buyer. And finally, mailability. So finding out how many opt-outs and hard bounces you have in the system, because that's going to inform how you load in the data and how you can market. And opt-outs and hard bounces, I remember came up quite a lot in the exam, in terms of you have a list of opted out prospects. How do you migrate it to the new system, design a strategy around that? So that's just an example. With that information, you need to design a strategy. And strategy is a word that's used quite a lot. I've used quite a lot, but this is how I just imagined it and how I learned it when I was studying for the exam. I thought, okay, so a strategy involves outlining the customer journey. We can start at this point. We want a customer journey that's going to make improvements where either the business's marketing is failing or not doing as well, or where marketing can actually support where other teams need help. So this is an example of a slimmed down customer journey. I've chosen to include just 4 stages. So awareness, investigation, evaluation, and committed. I'm sure you have already, or you will come across many different frameworks for customer journeys, which may have more stages, but I just wanted to keep this one simple. So each stage here, I've defined firstly the frame of mind that the prospect is in at the point of time. So for example, in the awareness stage, the prospect thinks they may have a pain point, whereas in the investigation stage, the prospect knows they have a pain point. And secondly, as you can see in the bullet points, this is a list of the marketing assets an organization could use to, in that stage, to move the prospect's mindset into the next stage. So of course, if you were doing this with a client, it would be a lot more detailed and more specific to them. I understand this one's very generic, but this in my mind is what I think about when asked to design a strategy. So it's a great start, but now a consultant should be able to translate what was in that diagram into Pardot, into a Pardot journey. So you have to think about which Pardot functionality enables these marketing activities to happen for prospects at the right time. Here's a high-level example of what could be used at each stage within Pardot that puts the journey into action. So in the first stage, which is the awareness stage, the objective is to attract and capture prospects. So for this, you're going to be calling upon Pardot features such as forms, social posting, using custom redirects to track prospects coming in from third-party websites or adverts. And you can see on the committed stage, I've just put now what, because the Pardot journey doesn't stop when the prospect purchases something, and clients will want to use Pardot for many other use cases, such as customer onboarding, where the customer gets themselves up and running, upsell campaigns, so suggesting similar products, complementary products, or trying to sell upgrades. and also renewals, so reminding the prospect to buy again when their subscription is coming to an end. You may come across questions in the consultant exam that address those use cases as well. So again, I've created a guide on this because there's only so much that I want to put on slides and talk to you about, because I think using your own personal experience, you can have a big impact on your studying when you sit down and you know, dive in yourself. So I've come to a close of all the content that I wanted to run through today. As I said, it was a very tricky topic to teach, but I hope that you've got something of value from this session, and just from me sharing how I approached the topic when I was first studying for the exam. The two posts that I mentioned in the presentation, part 2 and 3, I've actually written an overview as well. So on the blog, the part 1 goes into part 2 and 3. So I put in my notes takeaways in capitals with a question mark, because it's quite overwhelming, this section, as I've said before. And as I said, I think it's a really tricky one to teach because it's so broad, and I've tried to give examples of where you can find these use cases and what kind of use cases the exam touches upon. But I think just calling upon your personal experience is the way to study for this one. So yeah, I will turn it to a Q&A now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I think that was really insightful.
Thank you.
I can see the enthusiasm in the chat, and I can see 142 people listening to our first day.
Wow. Yes, thank you all for listening. It means a lot. Do we have any questions that came in, Aisha?
Yeah, I did jot down one question. First, are you going to share the slide deck?
I can do, yeah. I can do that on the Slack group.
Yeah, perfect.
That's the best place, right?
We'll figure out how we are delivering post bootcamp. And the second, we have one question from Brian. How do you come up with the business objective scenarios and put them in a grid like you provided for each business objective you have outlined?
So I'm just going to repeat the question to make sure I've understood it. So you're asking me, how did I come up with the business objectives in order to make the tables? Well, I found that reading Pardot's own customer use cases, they outline a lot of outcomes that their customers had using Pardot, right? So take a look at what they're talking about. It's things like I listed, MQLs, number of MQLs increased for a quarter or a year, over the course of a quarter or a year, or they talk about shortening the sales cycle. So things like this, these are all very common objectives. Then you just need to figure out, okay, which Pardot features would I use to solve those, and why would I use that combination of them? So that's really the thought process that you've got to go through to study for the exam. And yes, it may seem daunting, but that's why hands-on experience is so important for this exam.
Yeah, I think that answers it perfectly correct. But still, Bryn, if you have any more question, or if you feel like anything is not yet answered at your end, please feel free to put it in the chat.
I've just seen some more questions. Shall I crack on with those?
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So what possible challenges do you face during implementation? Do you come across any use cases which are not supported by out-the-box features? I'm not sure if they can be customized. Yeah, a lot of challenges you'll face in an implementation, especially perhaps you go to propose a solution and then find that there's some configuration in Salesforce that you hadn't discovered during the discovery. So if you think about a typical Pardot project, you'll do a lot of discovery to find out all the facts. To use a phrase, you don't want to leave any stones unturned. You want to make sure that you're trying to find out as much detail as possible, and having less assumptions, assuming less. So you want to be building your solutions based on fact. However, that's kind of impossible sometimes in a large organization to find out absolutely every single little detail. So of course you may come across a time where you make a solution and then realize that something is going to impact that solution, that you have to maybe change it slightly. That's, I guess, the challenge relating to this topic, but challenges in implementations more generally, lots of them, which I'm sure you're going to dive into for the rest of the week. So things like training users, adoption, all sorts of technical issues. But yeah, for the evaluation stage, the one that I just mentioned is the biggest takeaway there. If you're working with a Salesforce partner, you can, oh, sorry, that is not a question. Let's see. Are you talking about the prospect, as in the consultant dealing with a new Pardot B2B user, or are you talking about the B2B business dealing with a customer of their own? B2B business. Okay, so like the word prospect can be quite confusing because in a Pardot context, we're talking about prospects of the consultant. Yeah, that is a prospective client of the consultant, or we're talking about prospects in Pardot, so the object, the data, the records that are being tracked through Pardot. So in this evaluation stage, in this evaluation presentation, I've been talking in a number of different use cases. I've been talking as if you're a consultant about to start a project for a new client. I've also been talking if you're working on an existing client and just starting a new implementation within the same org. So yeah, I can understand that that's a bit confusing, but yeah, we're mostly talking about consultants and their clients. I'd like to know any similarities of Hubspot with Pardot. Hubspot and Pardot are very similar. I know this is a very cheeky plug, but recently another Pardot consultant wrote an overview of Hubspot versus Pardot. He works with both of them. So he was able to call out perhaps some differences, but all in all, they're very similar. You can read that overview on the drip as well. But I wouldn't be able to tell you because my dealings with Hubspot have been more taking data out of Hubspot and moving it into Pardot. So in terms of using Hubspot, I can't help so much there. Okay. I'm just reading through, just checking there's any more questions. Okay, what is the right set of stakeholders you should have for the business for the Pardot discovery sessions? Yeah, and this will depend on the size of the organization, because rightly so here you've said the analytics team, web development team. So for the discovery sessions, I would say the marketing leader, the marketing team, the users, the campaign managers, anybody that's in the marketing team the sales leader and also a member of the sales team. That could be a BDR, so a business development rep, or a sales or an account executive. For the more technical things, so the website team or the website agency, the IT team, they may have questions when actually purchasing Pardot. But if you think about it, as a consultant, you're coming in at the stage where the organization has purchased Pardot, they're just looking to implement it. So the IT team would probably have questions before that, that would have been solved. However, you would need to then get in touch with the IT team when you're doing the technical setup of Pardot, which I believe is the next session that you're going to be listening to tomorrow, whenever. So things like email authentication, setting up the tracking codes. But for the evaluation stages, you're looking at more sales and marketing teams. I think that's all the questions.
I do have a few more questions that I've talked
about. Oh, okay, go for it.
In general, what is the benefit of using Pardot in your org? It's asked by Anandi.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah. In general, what is the benefit of using Pardot in your org?
Well, all of the business objectives in the presentation, so things like decreasing the sales cycle, converting more leads more effectively, reusing dormant data, lost opportunities, disqualified leads, leads that have gone quiet, off the radar, giving more information to sales so that they can have more informed conversations when they talk to leads, using grading to find out how closely a prospect fits your model buyer, not just how interested they are in you, but how interested you should be in them. So these are great advantages of Pardot, and I could list off many more, but you know, I think that's enough to absorb for now.
Yeah, definitely. We can speak for hours and hours.
Oh yeah, you and I can, yeah.
So one more question by Pedro. Do you have a link for the business use case scenarios?
Yeah, there was some that I put on the blog post that I mentioned, but in terms of finding other ones, just listen to the Pardot webinars, you know, keynotes at Dreamforce, these replays, they always have customer stories in them. And also just on the Pardot websites as well, where they have customer case studies.
That Part Dream and recordings even, they are posted for 30 days, right? Part Dream and recording?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I meant like the Dreamforce keynotes and things like that. But Part Dreaming, I don't know if there were any customer use cases in there, but I've heard that they could be coming back. So yeah.
Okay. And the last, not the last.
Oh, wow, lots of questions.
Do you have a template to capture the responses to the questionnaire for evaluation and discovery?
Yeah, so the questions that I went through, so I think it was like 10 items for understanding the Pardot and Salesforce landscape of a particular org. Like I said, they're based on questions that I used to ask myself when I was a Pardot consultant. And I've made a blog post out of them. So they're on the blog, they're public. You can, yeah, check them out on there.
Cool. So one more we have, is ID unification across systems also part of consultation? How do you typically tackle this? I'll repeat myself.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's fine. I was just thinking of a good answer or the best way to phrase it. So yes, it is. And that's obviously part of the data strategy. So the Pardot connector the way Pardot and Salesforce work together, because they both use the same identifier for records, which is the CRM ID, the 18-digit Salesforce ID. That's used across both Salesforce and Pardot. So that's obviously taken care of. When you're integrating other systems, then you're going to have to think about unique identifiers for other systems and incorporate that into your data strategy. And of course, when you're migrating things, you need to consider that data from a lot of other marketing automation platforms, the unique identifier is email, which is not the case in Pardot. So again, you'll probably come across this later in the week when someone else talks about these things like AMPSIA, but that's my short answer to a potentially long answer.
Definitely. So we'll just take up one last question only for the day, which is, which one is best for business purpose, for client perspective, HubSpot or Pardot?
Wow, well, people really want to find out about HubSpot versus Pardot here. Sorry, do you mind repeating some of the question? It cut out a little bit.
Which one is best for business purpose, for client perspective, HubSpot or Pardot?
Well, that's a hard question to ask me. I'm a Pardot consultant. I love Pardot. I chose a career in Pardot for a reason. And I would honestly read the overview on the Drip blog, and not just because it's my blog, but because the guy that wrote it has worked with both of them. And he goes into a very good point that it's not just the marketing automation tool that you should be choosing or your clients should be choosing. It's the whole ecosystem that goes around it. So for example, Pardot is obviously very tightly aligned with Salesforce, but HubSpot may be more aligned with other tools. So it's not a simple decision, and I'm not going to give a straight answer on that one. I think it's a case-by-case basis, but they are very similar.
Definitely. So I think with that, we wrap up for the day, but not for the bootcamp. We have just started today, right? We have just kicked off today. That's the first session. We are still left with 6 more amazing sessions. So guys, thank you. First, I want to thank Lucy to, spare our time to help trailblazers out there, to share your knowledge. Lucy, trust me, this is very much appreciated. And big thank you to all the trailblazers for being an amazing audience and grabbing all the good stuff from Lucy. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. I hope to see you all on the rest 6 days. Lucy, do you have anything to say?
No, thanks a lot for listening to me talk about this quite broad topic. But yeah, I hope you learned something today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your days and have an awesome week.